Y'all, lock in, because what I'm about to walk you through sounds like the plot of a horror film that no studio in Hollywood would dare greenlight. But it's real. Every single word of it is real. A singer who rocketed to fame off a song literally titled Romantic Homicide is now officially headed to trial for homicide. Real homicide. The kind with autopsy photos so disturbing that veteran crime reporters physically stopped typing. The kind involving a 14-year-old girl, a Tesla that became a tune, a secret relationship that allegedly began when she was 11 years old, text messages plotting a runaway, the two of them codenamed Operation Awesome, an abortion at 13, a diamond ring on a child's hand, his name tattooed onto her finger in red ink, jealousy spiraling over an influencer, a fortune of more than $10 million hanging in the balance, and a fake alibi text message sent to a phone belonging to a girl who prosecutors say was already dead. And here's the part that should rattle anyone who's been following this case: everything the prosecution laid out across 5 explosive days in a Los Angeles courtroom. According to the district attorney himself, that was only a fraction of the evidence. A fraction. Tonight, we are breaking down every bombshell from the preliminary hearing against D4vd, the meteoric rise, the unthinkable fall, the body camera footage, the lies, the courtroom drama nobody saw coming, and the one haunting question that could determine whether the state of California pursues the death penalty against a 21-year-old who once had the entire music industry at his feet. Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the darker this gets. Let's start with the man at the center of it all. D4vd, born David Anthony Burke, is the Gen Z R&B sensation who exploded onto the scene in 2022 when Romantic Homicide climbed all the way to number 33 on the Billboard Hot 100. He was the kid with the haunting voice, the bedroom pop aesthetic, the multi-million-dollar future written all over him. And the money backs that up. Between 2023 and the end of 2025, D4vd raked in somewhere between $10 and $11.5 million in gross earnings. His own record label had reportedly pocketed $3.5 to $4 million off him alone. That's the dream. Now here's the nightmare. On September 8, 2025, a Tesla that had been sitting abandoned on the streets of the Hollywood Hills for weeks was finally towed to an impound yard. Workers there noticed something. A smell. A foul, unmistakable smell seeping out of the front trunk. When LAPD opened it, they found a heavily decomposed and dismembered human body. The Tesla was registered to D4vd. Roughly a week later, the medical examiner identified the remains: Celeste Rivas Hernandez, 14 years old. A girl from Lake Elsinore, California. A girl whose name the public barely knew at that point, but behind closed doors, detectives already knew exactly whose orbit she had been in. Now here's the detail that had the entire internet screaming at their screens for months: he was not arrested. Not that week. Not that month. Law enforcement publicly acknowledged he was the prime suspect in the investigation into Celeste's death, and then, silence. Months of it. People online were losing their minds, asking how a dismembered child turns up inside a celebrity's car and that celebrity just keeps living his life like nothing happened. But while the internet raged, investigators were building. Quietly. Methodically. In February of 2026, a grand jury was convened in Los Angeles County to review the evidence against D4vd. And in April of 2026, roughly 7 months after that tow yard discovery, the hammer finally came down. D4vd was arrested, and the LA County District Attorney's Office hit him with a devastating stack of charges: first-degree murder with special circumstances, continuous sexual abuse of a minor, and unlawful mutilation of human remains. He has been held without bail ever since. And that brings us to the main event, the 5-day preliminary hearing that just decided the fate of this case, and blew the doors off everything we thought we knew. Quick legal lesson, y'all, because it matters for understanding how massive this ruling really is. A preliminary hearing is not a trial. The prosecution doesn't have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the near-certainty standard a jury would use. Think of it as 99% confidence. At a prelim, the bar is just probable cause. Basically, is it more likely than not that a crime happened and this is the guy? Think 51%. It's a low bar. But low bar or not, the hearing doubles as a dress rehearsal. Both sides get to test their witnesses, watch how those witnesses hold up under pressure, and preview the battle lines for trial. And what the prosecution rolled out across those 5 days went way, way beyond 51% in the court of public opinion. Day 1. Tuesday, July 21st, cameras were banned from the courtroom, but reporters were inside, and what they witnessed, y'all, they will never forget. For the first time ever, autopsy photos were shown in open court. Images of Celeste's remains, still sealed in cadaver bags, still inside the front trunk of D4vd's Tesla. One veteran reporter in the room said there aren't even words for it. Journalists who covered death for a living literally stopped typing. The entire gallery froze. And then, the detail that shattered everyone, seated just rows ahead of the press, in that courtroom, were Celeste's parents. Her mother and father, seeing those images for the first time. Her mother, Mercy Haynes, bowed her head and wept while the photos were displayed. Sit with that for a second. Because before this hearing, Celeste existed in this case mostly as evidence, as remains, as an autopsy, as a headline. This week, for the first time, the courtroom was forced to see her as what she was, a living, breathing girl. A daughter. Now, let's get into the testimony, because day one also dragged a deeply uncomfortable truth out of the shadows. The first witness called was an LA County Sheriff's deputy who had been sent to D4vd's Hollywood Hills home way back in February of 2024, because Celeste, just 13 years old at the time, had been reported missing out of Lake Elsinore. The court saw body camera footage from that visit. And y'all, what it shows is chilling in hindsight. The deputies are led into the house by D4vd himself. Calm. Cooperative. Charming, even. He tells them, sure, he knows Celeste, they met online back in late 2021. He pulls up photos of her on his own phone. He shows them a yearbook picture. And then comes the claim that would echo through this entire case. D4vd tells those deputies that Celeste said she was 18, not 13. And that he hadn't seen her in months. That's his story. Remember it, because it collapses under its own weight. Here's why it matters so much. He's charged with continuous sexual abuse of a minor, and in California, that is a strict liability crime. Meaning what? Meaning if he was 18 and she was 13 and there was a sexual relationship, the crime is automatic. There is no, she told me she was older, defense. It does not exist. The law does not care what she claimed, the obligation was on him. But it gets worse for him, y'all. So much worse. Because the family's attorney, Patrick Steinfeld, came out and said the quiet part loud, D4vd was directly told, in February of 2024, that Celeste was only 13 years old. Told. Directly. And according to prosecutors, the relationship continued anyway. Steinfeld said he finds it abhorrent that the defense would try to pin even an ounce of blame on this child. And honestly, that's not a legal argument. That's the prosecution handing the jury a moral verdict on a silver platter. Now, ready for the twist that flipped the entire narrative of this case on its head? Because for months, the picture painted publicly was that this was a one-sided obsession, a starstruck teenage girl chasing an older celebrity, jealous of his relationships with other women, pushing for more than he wanted to give. The text messages say the exact opposite. According to testimony, D4vd and Celeste first started talking back in 2021, when she would have been just 11 years old, and he was 16 or 17. They met on Instagram and Discord. For a while, prosecutors say, it stayed virtual. Then in November of 2023, they allegedly met in person for the first time. And by Valentine's Day of 2024, they were trying to make it permanent. Celeste's parents reported her missing on February 15, 2024. That same month, the very same month, first responders did that wellness check at D4vd's home. The body cam visit. The one where he claimed he hadn't seen her in months. And this is where the texts come in, and y'all, this is where the case turns from disturbing to downright sinister. In court, text messages were read aloud showing D4vd and Celeste discussing something they called OA, Operation Awesome. Their code name. Their plan for her to run away from her family's home in Lake Elsinore and come live with him in the Hollywood Hills. And here's the part that had reporters doing double takes. According to the testimony, D4vd appears to be the one pushing it. Not her. Him. He's the one repeatedly asking, do you have your bags packed? He tells her to bring everything she'll need that he can't immediately replace. Bring a bigger bag. Do you have everything packed? Are you ready to go? And in one of those exchanges, he allegedly calls her runaway date, the day before Valentine's Day, 2024, the most important day of her life. Aside, he says, from their anticipated wedding. Their wedding. She was 13. Let me make sure that lands. At the exact same time D4vd was standing at his front door on body camera, telling sheriff's deputies he hadn't seen this girl in months. His own phone allegedly contained message after message planning her escape, planning their future, planning a wedding with a 13-year-old child. The deputy stood there getting the calm, charming, cooperative version of him. The phone told the truth. And the courtroom also learned something that reframed Celeste entirely. Up until this point in the hearing, she had been presented as evidence, remains in a bag, an autopsy subject, a collection of injuries. But that afternoon, through the photos and messages prosecutors were allowed to show, she became a person again. The court saw Celeste at 13 with what appeared to be a diamond engagement ring on her left ring finger, the same finger that had D4vd's name tattooed on it in red ink. They saw photos of the two of them kissing, cuddling in bed, selfies of Celeste with her red hair in the front seat of his Tesla. Prosecutors were building something here, and it was deliberate, a portrait of a relationship. How much time they spent together. What they talked about. The future they allegedly planned. According to the testimony, he was the one who brought up moving in together, spending more time together, even having children. He allegedly texted Celeste's number that they wanted 2 kids. 2 kids. With a girl who was 13 years old when these conversations were documented. And then came the revelation that sucked the air out of the courtroom. The court saw messages discussing an abortion appointment for Celeste in January of 2024. Do the math, y'all. Her birthday was September of 2010. She was 13 years old. 13. There had been earlier references in their texts to abortion and the morning after pill, but this was an actual appointment being discussed. A 13-year-old girl, pregnant, allegedly by an adult man with a multi-million-dollar career to protect. Hold on to that word, protect. Because now we arrive at motive. And this is where the prosecution's theory of first-degree murder snaps into focus. Enter Asia Collins, an LA-based influencer and social media model with a real platform online. According to the testimony, it was her perception of D4vd's association with Asia, their rumored friendship, maybe the early stages of something more, that sent Celeste into a spiral of anger and jealousy. The night before he allegedly sent an Uber to bring Celeste to his home in April of 2025, Celeste was texting him in a fury. She told him she was going to mutilate him. She told him she didn't want to see one more instance of him tagged in posts with Asia Collins. For the record, Asia Collins later came out publicly and stated she never dated D4vd, and said she wants justice for Celeste. But here's the key, y'all, the hinge this entire murder case swings on. Prosecutors allege Celeste wasn't just venting. She was threatening. In messages read aloud in court by a detective, Celeste tells him she's going to ruin his career. She tells him she's going to tell her father about him. She tells him she has the contact information for his business associates, and for his mother, Colleen Burke. She tells him she's going to call his mother and tell her damaging information. A 14-year-old girl was threatening to expose an illegal sexual relationship with a star whose career was worth millions. And the prosecution's theory is as simple as it is horrifying: D4vd killed her to silence her. Because understand what's at stake. This isn't just about a scandal. He had grossed $10 to $11.5 million between 2023 and the end of 2025. His label head had made $3.5 to $4 million off him alone. The testimony about his finances, who paid the bills, who reviewed expenses, how much money this whole operation was generating, wasn't random. It was foundational. Because one of the 3 special circumstances attached to his first-degree murder charge is murder for financial gain. 3 special circumstances, y'all. Murder for financial gain. Lying in wait. And killing a witness, killing someone to keep them from testifying or exposing a crime. Those special circumstances are the legal machinery that makes this case eligible for the death penalty in California. Eligible, even though California has had a moratorium on execution since 2019. Prosecutors allege D4vd killed a 14-year-old because she threatened to expose their illegal relationship, and exposure would have detonated his career. That's the theory. That's first-degree murder with the whole weight of the state behind it. Now let's talk about the night prosecutors say it happened, April 23, 2025. According to the state's theory, D4vd called Celeste an Uber, a rideshare sent to pick up a 14-year-old girl from her family's home in Lake Elsinore and drive her roughly 80 miles to his house in the Hollywood Hills. And somewhere inside that house, prosecutors allege, D4vd murdered her. But here's where this case gets genuinely complicated, and where the defense found its footing. We cannot definitively say how Celeste died. The medical examiner determined that Celeste's death was a homicide, caused by multiple penetrating injuries. But listen to the careful language, because every word here is a battlefield. They did not identify what weapon or tool caused those penetrating injuries. They wouldn't even commit to calling it a wound from a sharp instrument. They're not saying she was definitively stabbed. Why? Because of the advanced state of decomposition. After months inside that front trunk, the science simply could not answer the most basic question in any murder case: what killed her? And the defense pounced on that uncertainty. Hard. Defense attorney Marilyn Bednarski pressed Deputy Medical Examiner Dr. Grant Ho on a line of questioning that made half the courtroom sit up straighter. Is it helpful, during an autopsy, to know whether the deceased had a mental health history? Whether they were suicidal? Whether they were habitual drug users? To each question, Dr. Ho answered, potentially. Then came the follow-up: did you ever speak with Celeste's relatives to explore any of that? He had not. Then Bednarski zeroed in on the injuries themselves, the penetrating wounds, the disrupted rib, the damage to her liver. Can you definitively connect those internal findings to what appears on the skin? Can you say exactly how it happened? Can you definitively state that another person caused these injuries? And the broad answer, y'all, was no. The decomposition precludes certainty. The medical examiner cannot say exactly how Celeste died, and cannot say with scientific finality who did it. Now, do I think the defense is genuinely going to argue that a 14-year-old girl killed herself, then dismembered her own body, then stuffed herself into the front trunk of D4vd's Tesla? Of course not. But that's not the point. The point is doubt. Their entire job at trial will be to widen every crack in the forensic evidence until a juror can't get to 99%. This was them drawing the blueprint, right there in open court. And speaking of dismemberment, the chainsaws. Y'all probably remember this detail from when the case first broke. Chainsaws were recovered from his home. The internet ran wild with it. But here's what the hearing revealed: there was no positive test indicating the possible presence of blood on those chainsaws. None. Defense attorney Blair Burke hammered an LAPD witness about why the chainsaws weren't taken into evidence, suggesting that touch DNA testing, which was never done, might have painted a fuller picture of what happened and who else might have been involved. The prosecution's criminalist held firm and was sharp in her answers. But the questions linger. And remember, according to reporting around this case, D4vd allegedly purchased 3 chainsaws. 2 were recovered and tested clean. So where is the third one? Hold that thought, because the geography of this case is about to become its own character. According to prosecutors, after allegedly killing Celeste, D4vd set about building himself an alibi. He texted Celeste's phone, "Where you at?" A message sent to a girl who, under the state's theory, was already dead at his hands. A performance. Breadcrumbs for an audience he knew would eventually read them. And then, the data tells the story. D4vd's phone and his Tesla are both recorded traveling about 95 miles northwest into Santa Barbara County. A cell phone expert testified that analysis of the data shows the Tesla moving from the Hollywood Hills, west along Sunset Boulevard, then north up the coast, and that the path of that Tesla matches the path of D4vd's iPhone. Same day. Same time. Same locations. And here's the kicker, that route lines up with the area where Celeste's passport card was later recovered, near Lake Cachuma, just off State Road 154. Her personal items, scattered 95 miles from where she was allegedly killed. Now, the defense had an answer for that too, and credit where it's due, it's not nothing. Their argument goes, fine, the car made that trip. The phone made that trip. But can you prove D4vd himself was in the car with that phone? There's no video of him driving it. No witness placing him behind the wheel. No surveillance footage of the alleged crime itself. No eyewitness to any of it. That is all true. But then the obvious follow-up hangs in the air like smoke. If someone else was driving his Tesla and carrying his phone along the exact route where Celeste's belongings turned up, who? And why hasn't that mystery person been charged with anything? The defense will have to answer that at trial, because juries don't love invisible phantoms. Day 2 of the hearing took us somewhere even darker, inside D4vd's garage, and the science of what happened to her body after death. And y'all, this is the part where I need to warn you, what comes next is brutal. According to testimony from LAPD criminalists, investigators found blood in the brick flooring of the garage at the Hollywood Hills home, underneath black rubber mats that had been laid down where a car would park. Picture what that means. The theory being painted is that blood leaked out of that Tesla, soaked through those rubber mats, and seeped into the brick beneath them. That is not a spatter. That is not a drop. That is blood pooling long enough, heavily enough, to penetrate layers of material and stain the foundation of the house itself. Reporters sitting behind Celeste's parents described the moment that testimony landed as jarring. Because this isn't abstract forensics. This is a girl's blood, in a man's garage, soaking through the floor. And then, the detail that tells you everything about the alleged cover-up, someone noticed the smell. Of course they noticed the smell. So what did they do? According to testimony, somebody opened that front trunk, with Celeste's remains inside, and placed multiple air fresheners in there, trying to mask the odor of a decomposing child. Multiple. All of it documented. All of it photographed. All of it taken into evidence. Air fresheners, y'all. That's not panic. That's not confusion. Prosecutors will argue that is a conscious, calculated effort to conceal a crime, the kind of consciousness of guilt evidence that juries find devastating. Dar. Ho also described what he encountered when the case first came across his table, the beginning stages of maggot infestation around the victim's remains as he prepared for the autopsy. One reporter noted it was a mercy that Celeste's parents weren't in the courtroom for that portion of the testimony. I'll just leave that there. Now, Day 3 brought something nobody saw coming, and honestly, y'all, this subplot deserves its own documentary. Courtroom drama that had nothing to do with the evidence and everything to do with the politics of this prosecution. Private investigator Steve Fisher, a man who has been a central figure in this case for months, was supposed to testify. Fisher was hired by the property owner who had been renting the Hollywood Hills home to D4vd, and he had personally gathered a mountain of evidence, neighborhood surveillance footage, digital evidence between the singer and the teen, and more. He had already testified before the grand jury twice. By every measure, he should have been a star witness at this prelim. Instead, Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman asked the judge to exclude him entirely, claiming Fisher had violated grand jury secrecy. According to Fisher's own account, the bad blood between him and Silverman runs deep. He says she never wanted him investigating this case in the first place, that she resented him publicly questioning why items like the chainsaws and what he describes as a burn cage at the property weren't in evidence, and why 4 terabytes of surveillance footage from a house across the street was allowed to be overridden before anyone captured it. Fisher says he was told, incorrectly, he insists, that as a grand jury witness he could never speak about the case again, not even to his own client. He points out that it's the grand jurors who are bound by secrecy, not the witnesses. Then comes the hallway incident, and y'all, this is where it gets wild. Fisher says he was waiting outside the courtroom when a man in a suit approached him and introduced himself, Patrick Steinfeld, Celeste's family attorney. Steinfeld thanked him for keeping the story alive in the press. Fisher asked how the family was holding up. And at that moment, according to Fisher, Beth Silverman came storming down the hallway, physically pulled Steinfeld away, and told him he was not allowed to speak with Fisher, calling it illegal. The next day, with the court already on the record, Silverman allegedly turned, pointed directly at Fisher in the gallery, and declared that he had broken grand jury secrecy laws, saying she was having a warrant issued for his arrest. Fisher says the judge handled it with total professionalism, and he agreed to leave voluntarily. But he asked for one thing on the record, that it be known Steinfeld had approached him, not the other way around. And Steinfeld, to his credit, stood up right there in court and confirmed exactly that. So Fisher walked out, excluded from the witness list, at least for the prelim. If this case goes to trial, expect him back. And expect fireworks, because that grudge is now permanently baked into the public record. Meanwhile, through all 5 days, one more silent drama was playing out at the defense table, D4vd himself. The judge ruled he didn't need to be handcuffed, but he did have to remain shackled. And reporters watching him across the entire hearing described the same eerie picture over and over, still. Composed. Staring straight ahead. Answering when spoken to. Giving away absolutely nothing, a word his own courtroom observers have used is off, and others have gone further, describing what they saw as sociopathic calm. But there was one crack in the mask. Just one. When the testimony turned to the explicit images found on his phone, images allegedly showing D4vd and Celeste engaged in sexual activity, described in open court in graphic terms, reporters noticed him start to unravel. He fidgeted. He seemed to shrink into his seat. He looked down. His right leg started bouncing up and down. For 5 days, the man was stone. But when the contents of his own phone were put on display, that's when D4vd finally reacted. Make of that what you will, y'all. I know what I make of it. And let's not gloss over the weeks that turned this from a tragedy into a full-blown public firestorm. That Tesla sat abandoned on a public street in the Hollywood Hills for weeks, while Celeste's remains decomposed inside it. Neighbors walked past it. Nobody knew. When the car was finally towed and the truth came out, the outrage was immediate and volcanic. How does a car linked to a chart-topping artist sit rotting on a residential street while a missing child is inside it? And then came the months of silence that followed, no arrest, no charges, just a prime suspect living free while the internet kept receipts. Celeste's family, shattered, ultimately said publicly that their hearts were broken beyond repair and that all they wanted was justice for their daughter. That public pressure never let up, and many believe it helped push this case from a cold tow yard to a grand jury room. So let's talk about the ruling, because after 5 days of testimony that seasoned court watchers described as some of the most disturbing evidence they had ever encountered, the judge made it official: the case against D4vd is going to trial. Deputy DA Beth Silverman told the court that the crime at the center of this case is incredibly horrific and barbaric, and that it should shock no one that the evidence proving a horrific and barbaric crime would itself be difficult to see and hear. But that, she said, is the evidence. And the state intends to make sure a jury eventually sees all of it. Now here's where we separate the heat from the light, y'all, because a preliminary hearing win is not a conviction, not even close. Let's be honest about what the prosecution does not have. There is no murder weapon. The chainsaws they recovered tested negative for blood. There is no surveillance footage from inside that house. The Uber driver cannot definitively say where he dropped Celeste off. There were no text messages presented at this hearing showing D4vd planning to kill Celeste in advance. In fact, the messages suggest she invited herself over that night, that she wasn't lured. And the medical examiner cannot tell us exactly what killed her. Those are real gaps. Any sharp defense attorney, and D4vd has an excellent one in Blair Burke, is going to drive a truck through every single one of them. The defense also signaled it may explore Celeste's mental health history at trial, something the judge said they might be allowed to pursue. You can see the strategy forming: raised doubt about the cause of death, raised doubt about who was driving that car, raised doubt about what actually happened inside that house. But here's why the prosecution still loves its position, and it comes down to one window of time. If the state can establish that Celeste arrived at that property alive, and that roughly 20 minutes later, he was texting her phone, "Where are you?" then the self-defense and accident theories start to suffocate. Think about it. If this were truly self-defense, a terrified man fighting for his life, how does he compose an alibi text within minutes? If she somehow harmed herself, why wouldn't he call 911? Why does the very first move after a child's death appear to be a staged message to her phone? That time frame, prosecutors will argue, is the fingerprint of premeditation. That is first-degree murder written in minutes. And then there's the trump card hanging over everything. The district attorney says the public has seen only a fraction of the evidence. Nathan Hochman himself has confirmed there's more, much more, that wasn't presented at the prelim. And when a district attorney stands at a podium and uses the words "only a fraction" out loud, believe him, prosecutors show their weakest hand at a preliminary hearing, never their strongest. So what could it be? Let's speculate responsibly. We have not heard from Neil Langston, a figure reportedly in D4vd's orbit who was reportedly arrested for failing to appear as a witness and is believed to have testified before the grand jury. We have not heard from Asia Collins. Prosecutors have also moved to subpoena members of D4vd's own family, and you have to ask why. What did his family know? What comments did he allegedly make to them? Who handled the registration and insurance on that Tesla? And remember those earlier filings claiming he lied to friends and associates about the smell of decomposition? That testimony never surfaced at the prelim. Neither did the third chainsaw. 3 purchased, 2 recovered, both clean. The prosecution may still be holding the answer to where the third one went. Hochman has also been clear-eyed about the nature of his own case. It remains a circumstantial case, not a direct evidence case. There is probably no eyewitness coming. But y'all, circumstantial cases win all the time when the circumstances are this loud. The body in his car. The blood through his garage floor. The air fresheners in the trunk. The phone and the Tesla tracing the same path to where her passport was dumped. The alibi text sent minutes after she arrived. Any one of those is a question mark. All of them together is a pattern. Now let's address the charge that may matter most at trial: continuous sexual abuse of a minor. Because while the defense has room to maneuver on the murder count, this one looks like a fortress wall. The texts, the photos, the videos, prosecutors say they have images showing D4vd himself engaged in sexual activity with Celeste. Conversations about sexual activity. Conversations about an abortion. This isn't a case of, was it really his phone? According to the state, he is in the pictures. And California law is merciless here, strict liability. It does not matter what she told him about her age. It does not matter what he believed. If the conduct happened, the crime happened. That charge alone carries up to 16 years in prison, and legal observers are already wondering whether the defense quietly folds on it and tries to save its ammunition for the murder count. Which brings us to the biggest unanswered question of all: will California seek the death penalty? Hochman has said publicly that this case is death penalty eligible. Those 3 special circumstances make sure of that, but his office has not decided whether to pursue it. And here's the strategic layer most people miss: the death penalty isn't just a punishment, it's leverage. A plea deal is absolutely on the table. Hochman has said that if he wants to come forward with a plea, the state is open to that conversation. Take death off the table in exchange for a guilty plea. That's how these games are played. Because capital cases are brutal for everyone: longer timelines, death-qualified juries that are notoriously hard to seat, mental health experts, mitigation phases, and a victim's family forced to relive the worst moment of their lives for years instead of months, all while California's execution moratorium means a death sentence might never be carried out anyway. So what happens next? D4vd is due back in court on August 31st for his arraignment, the formal reading of the charges. From there, both sides dig in. The defense now has something priceless: 5 full days of the prosecution's evidence, witnesses, and strategy, all on the record, all testable. That's the hidden value of a preliminary hearing for the defense. It's a free preview of the enemy's playbook. They'll spend the coming months dissecting what worked, what didn't, and where the cracks are. The prosecution, meanwhile, keeps building: more witnesses, more subpoenas, more evidence they insist is still coming. A realistic trial date? Don't hold your breath, y'all. We could be looking at 2027 before a jury ever hears this case. And so here we are. A song called "Romantic Homicide" that turned out to be a prophecy. A 13-year-old girl with a diamond ring and a tattoo of a grown man's name. A runaway plot with a code name. An 80-mile Uber ride that ended, prosecutors say, in a garage with blood soaking through the floor. Air fresheners in a trunk. A text message sent to a dead girl's phone. And a 21-year-old star sitting perfectly still in a courtroom, until the moment his own phone was opened in front of the world. But I want to leave you with the question that nobody in that courtroom could answer, the one that keeps me up at night. The prosecution says it has more evidence. The defense says it has real doubt. A third chainsaw is still missing. And somewhere between Lake Elsinore and Lake Cachuma, the full truth about what happened to Celeste Rivas Hernandez in her final hours is still hiding. So sound off in the comments, y'all. Do you think the circumstantial evidence is already enough to convict? Do you think the defense's self-defense and unknown driver theories have any chance with a jury? And should the DA take the death penalty off the table to secure a guaranteed conviction, or go for everything? Drop your take below, because this case is far from over, and when the next bombshell drops, the arraignment, the witness list, that missing chainsaw, you already know I'll be right here breaking it down first. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter of this case. Because if what we've seen is only a fraction of the evidence, y'all, we haven't seen anything yet.